Hey everyone, Joy Brooks, Email and Coffee. I'm talking today with Rhonda Bowen, all the way from Deutschland. Rhonda, tell us a little bit about yourself. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ja, ich spreche auch Deutsch und Sie sprechen auch Deutsch. But we'll go back to English because not everybody's in Germany
Please.
like I am. That's probably a better idea. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Joy. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Two of the things that play a big role in my life, email and coffee. Unfortunately, sometimes in that order. I know I try not to drink so much coffee anymore, but I'm sure you get a lot of emails just like we all do. So this is a wonderful way to be starting a conversation. My name is Rhonda Bowen. As you can probably hear from my accent, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, not from Germany. But I've lived here since 1983 permanently, and I've had my business here since 1988. And so I am very much a person who lives in both of those worlds, but also in lots of other worlds because I've had the privilege of traveling all over the world and speaking to people in person from more than 70 countries, in many of those countries. And my role until recently, I described as a strategic global communication guide, meaning global, all of these very different people that I've worked with, strategic, helping people think about how they communicate. And communicate included everything from nice conversations like you and I having to difficult conversations to teams and meetings and negotiations and all kinds of wonderful things where people communicate, because I focused on the two different kinds of culture that I believed existed in the world for many years. If you live in one country, but you grew up in another country, or you have a passport from another country, then we talk about nationalities or geographical differences in culture. But for me, working in a lot of big organizations throughout my life, I've noticed that one of the things that's even stronger often is the organizational culture. So why can't people from the finance department talk to engineers? And that's just a big a culture.
Question.
That's a big, just as big a cultural divide as whether two people come and grew up in the same country or live in the same country. So for me, and especially when I moved my business completely online in 2019, when we work remotely, sometimes the organizational culture things are more prevalent than the geographical ones because we're all on a screen like we are today. And so a lot of the things that we used to have to worry about in the past about being in another country and whether you kiss, bow, or shake hands, like the book says, or whatever you do, those kinds of things don't happen so much on a screen anymore. But finance people still can't talk to engineers on a screen. And therefore, I worked with people I call best professionals: business, engineering, science, technology, everything I'm not. So when people came and talked to me, I always said, if you can make me understand it, if you can get rid of the jargon, if you can make sure that somebody who knows nothing about chemistry, although you have a PhD in chemistry, if you can explain to me what exactly it is you're talking about so that I could explain it to someone else, then the communication works. And that's the important thing. And as I said, for many people, working and talking with your peers is great. It's easy. Everybody understands everything. But the minute the finance person has to explain spreadsheets to an engineer, it's probably not so easy. And therefore, making sure that all of these differences in communication, geographical, organizational, then the structures you need. Is it a meeting? Is it a negotiation? Is it one of those difficult conversations like somebody's being fired? You know, all those kinds of things that come up. And if they're across different cultures, it's got an extra layer of what is really important to make sure the communication works. And that's something I've been doing for many, many years, both in English and in German, whichever is necessary.
Which lends for you the ability to, if you can communicate with other people, and if you're doing that as a profession, you're getting an, a look into all these other people and able to I don't know, you're able to pick up from them because you're communicating with them. Something that lends itself to flexibility, something that over time allows you to, I understand how this person thinks. I'm able to work with this person. I'm able to have a project with this person. I'm able to learn what they do. And it builds and builds and builds. where you become very, very flexible. One of the things in my career being in marketing was because the only niche I was marketing. I worked for a, a manufacturing company. I worked for a book company. I worked for so many different within so many different industries that I had to learn their business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I know marketing, but your marketing or your marketing or your marketing is different depending on what you're doing. Who are you marketing to? What is it that you're marketing?
Mm-hmm.
How much money you have? Do you, what's your voice? All of these things. And while some people, I ended up niching down into email marketing over time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did learn from all these different venues, and eventually working marketing through an agency where I was forced to work with every type of business that you can imagine, I began to get an understanding about different businesses, and it really opened my eyes up because I can think differently. While somebody who's only been, in, let's say, okay, so they're a chemist.
Mm-hmm.
And they work for a chemical company and they understand what they're doing, and that's all they understand. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But what we call in email marketing people who have done every phase of the job. So I can migrate someone onto a different ESP. I can build an email template. I can send a campaign. I can create a database. I can, I can do life cycle marketing. I could do lead gen more. I mean, I could do everything. We call those people unicorns. And I called you before when we were talking a unicorn. And that's essentially because you can do a lot of different things. And that's in your toolbox. That's part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very important skill.
Well, and it's something that's happened with these 38 plus years of being in business, having my own business for 38 years, but also just by being exposed to so many different people. And I know, going back to your forte, which is email marketing, after 30 years of traveling the world and getting on airplanes and flying to Australia for 3 days and flying back, and when I decided at 60 I didn't want to be doing that anymore and move my business online, and I started talking to people much younger than I was, which was great. And they said, "Oh, Rhonda, it doesn't matter. You just need to put something up online." And I said, "I have a 30-year reputation that I have to put up online, and not just something, number one." And then they started talking to me about how to find my ideal client. And I'm like, "Do you know how many thousands of people I've worked with over the years?" Yeah, but we have to get it all down to one. I was like, what one, and that's why I got to best. I didn't get to one, but I got to four. And I thought, well, that was pretty good. But the other question that these people always asked me was, well, what do people say about you? And I thought, oh, that's an interesting question, because if you're talking to people in an offline world, you don't run around and ask people what they think about you so that you could put it somewhere out online. You have normal conversations with normal people. And that really forced me back for a moment. And I started asking people. And it was funny, you have come up with exactly the first word that people have, and my acronym is FIT. Not physically fit. I'm not an athlete by any means, but FIT stands for flexible, insightful, and tolerant.
It's important.
Yeah.
Flexibility is very important.
Mm-hmm.
The old like I bend like a reed in the wind. It's very important
Mm-hmm.
because while there's a difference between flexible and fickle.
Yeah.
Flexible is strategic.
Mm-hmm.
So, you think about your business model and you come up, this is my plan. This is plan A. But what about plan B, C, D, and E? Because there's got to be something there in your head and some people will say, oh, are you not confident in your model? No, it's not that I'm not confident. Stuff happens. like COVID out of nowhere. Stuff happens. So you've got, and if anything, COVID taught us all that lesson. You've got to think to yourself, what if? And know what the signs are and when to shift. And that doesn't mean pack your bags and leave. That simply means, take out a different tablecloth. It's fairly simple, but it's happened. And knowing the signs is part of that flexibility. What was insight? Sorry, it's part of that insight, not flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of that insight when you're saying to yourself, something's going on here. I'm not sure. My eyes are open. Let's see, is it time to flex?
Mm-hmm.
So, I was beginning to tell you a story before about what I saw on LinkedIn that emotionally tugs at me. And that is, you've got coaches on LinkedIn who grab onto a trend. So 4 years ago, it was get yourself seen on LinkedIn. Everybody wanted to get seen on LinkedIn, and you had a coach to help you get seen on LinkedIn. What to do? Okay, so guess what's popular now? AI. So now you've got AI coaches. So the coaches that were doing LinkedIn are now doing AI. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not here to judge. They're being flexible, which is my rule.
Mm-hmm.
But over flexible. To some extent, if you can taste it, feel it, see it, if it's a duck, I'm calling it a duck. So
Mm-hmm.
don't grift out. A skill is to be able to be flexible, have insight, and be tolerant. I like that. That's a skill. That's a skill set. There's a difference between flexibility and then just totally changing your business because it's not trending anymore. That, like I said, I emotionally, I have an issue with that, and I'm calling it emotion because I'm thinking to myself, is it envy that I didn't do that? Or is it something else? Is it just annoying? Is it just I'm annoyed? Because weren't you that LinkedIn person a few years? How do you set yourself up in your business so that you're using those first two, that flexibility and that insight? Like, do you have a methodology or something that you have recognized over time where it just kicks in for you and you're like, okay, the red flag went up?
Well, I don't know how familiar you and the audience are with things like gene keys and human design, but those are things that I have been very much into recently because they, depending on when you were born and where you were born, the way astrology works and those kinds of things, it gives you insights into your personality. And what I've seen through getting into this is it has just strengthened my vision of what my insight is for me. And so the important thing with that is when I first read my gene keys 5, 6 years ago, it said something among other things that said, you are not meant to come into your own until later in life. My words. Okay. And I was like, oh, well, first of all, when is later in life? And B, what is it about me or about life or about the combination of both that says that I'm really supposed to be who I really am supposed to be, not when I'm 25, but now maybe like now when I'm 67, I don't know. And for me, what that has become is AI and the access that we all have. Now, I mean, there's been AI around for a very, very long time, but the fact that we all now have access to AI, and I've been doing lots of things in AI, and people, what I haven't done though is say, I used to be LinkedIn and now I'm AI. I have always been communication and I am still communication. And now I am showing people how you can be the two E words in my life always have been. How can you make communication effective and efficient? And AI has just put a wonderful new layer on top of being effective and efficient compared to what we did before we were all using AI. And for me, I am still doing the very practical work that I have always done. I walk into a room, I sit down with people, they're struggling with their negotiation, with having their meetings running too long, whatever it is. And we sit down and we practice, and then we take it apart, and then we figure out what that is. That's exactly what I'm doing now with AI. I am not an AI expert. I will never be an AI expert. I'm a baby boomer. I didn't grow up with computers or anything like that. But I am very good at what the practical things are. So if you sit down and talk to me and say, Rhonda, I've got all this data and I just don't know what to do with it. And it takes me so long to get this all organized. You come to me, we get in a room like this. I open up 2 or 3 tools. I show you some things and the eyes get really big and say, oh, you can do that with AI? All I'm doing is what I have always done. First, with teaching German people how to speak English, teaching people from the rest of the world how to speak English as well. When I still lived in the US, teaching at the university, teaching students how to speak German. It's always been, how do you communicate better? And how do you make sure that the person on the other side of the screen or the table or wherever it is understands what you want to say? The effect works. They actually know what it is you're trying to get at. And you're doing it in a way that's efficient, because the longer it takes, the more that gets lost. And so AI for me is just the next automatic part that comes into what I've been doing all this time. And I guess maybe that's why my Gene Keys said you won't come into fruition until later. Maybe I've just been waiting for AI. I don't know, but we will see. But the interesting thing is, I treat AI the same way I treated another language when I was first doing things with language, the way I treated the frameworks that I've set up for all kinds of things about how to create and develop conversations. It's a Creavelop framework. I have all kinds of things like this to help people just make it easier, more effective, and more efficient. And that's what AI is helping us do now in a way that we couldn't do before, which is wonderful. That's why the other big E word is evolution. I don't change what I do, I evolve what I do. And if you go to my LinkedIn profile, what will you see under the picture? Open to evolve. Okay, so I'm not saying you throw away all the old stuff. You just keep adapting to what's making its way now, making sure you're in alignment with that. Because if you throw one thing out and do the next thing, I could never do that, because that doesn't fit with my values. I'm not a throwaway person. I don't do one thing until it gets boring and then do something else. I just try to keep evolving and building on what it is that is coming into the world, the new opportunities we are getting. And that's why I am shifting my whole identity. We spoke about identity before we started the recording, to what I'm calling the Patrona of Possibilities. Because there are so many new possibilities now in the world. And somebody who's been around the block as many times as I have just knows about lots and lots of different things. And when I talk to people, I say, oh, have you thought about this? Or did you ever hear about that? And whether that's AI or something totally different, it doesn't matter. Because people just need a wider horizon. And that's where I see my identity now. I am in the world to be the Patrona, patron on the one hand, like in the religious sense of the patron saint of travelers, for example, is Saint Christopher. I've traveled a lot. And then the other idea of being a patron, like of a restaurant, to come in and to buy the food and support the business of the restaurant by being a client or a customer or a patron. And for me, I'm being the Patrona of Possibilities. I'm just helping people see what's going on in the world and helping them find the best possibilities for them to put into their lives.
Very interesting. What comes to mind is, and I'm not sure if this is true or not. Probably worthwhile looking into it. But for so long, the career model was to go to higher education and get a credential that would allow you to work in a business. I'm an accountant. I'm a dentist, right? Now there are obviously some of those credentials that really do niche you into a specific field, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the model that seems to have changed because of the entrepreneur, the person that just came into business, set it up, spun it out, sold it, moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly doing that. Where we thought, what is that? What is that? It's a businessman. You know, sometimes it works for the entrepreneur, sometimes it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes they lose their shirts, but they don't give up and say, well, I'm not going to do that. They're just like, I learned something there. I'm not going to do that again
Mm-hmm.
because I learned something. Not that I'm never going to buy another business or I'm never, right? Never. They flip businesses. That's what they do. But it's not so much that the concept today has changed from having a particular career and flipping. It's more along the lines of, I'm not going to college, to university necessarily to come out with a specific credential because I don't know what I want to do. Which is, right now, that's very discomforting. And it's not working for the university model.
No.
Education was set up, it's something I said last night to a friend of mine. I'm learning language now, and I'm finding it very difficult in my chapter on verbs to conjugate because it says memorize the model. And I'm 70 and I'm thinking, have I lost the memory section of my brain? I can't seem to memorize.
No, but see, some of us never were good at memorizing, ever. Yeah.
But I said, amo, amas, amat, amamos, amate, amant. I'm like, okay, there it is. I just conjugated the verb.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked. That's what schools are set up to do. That's the model. Here's the book. Read the book. Remember the book. Take the test. Pass the test. Take another class.
Mm-hmm.
Round out your education. But memorize. That's no longer the model.
Well, and the model is even less the model than it used to be. Because, as I said, when I was growing up, besides going to school and doing the normal things, I also was taking piano lessons with a piano teacher who said, you and I are going to play a duet on two pianos, and you are going to memorize this 25-page whatever thing. And I do not memorize well, even way back then when my brain was much younger than it is now. And I gave up having lessons with this teacher, not because he wasn't a good teacher, but because he wasn't helping me learn to play the piano in a way that was aligned with the way my brain worked. And I gave up piano at the age of 12. And everybody was devastated because I had so much talent and I have long fingers and, whatever. And the interesting thing was when I got to high school, the lady who was the music teacher and was running the choir said to me, oh, I heard you used to be able to play the piano. And that sparked me into all kinds of things because I said, what do you mean used to? Yeah, well, I heard you don't take lessons anymore, so I guess you don't play the piano anymore. And I said, oh, I do play the piano. She said, well, if you're good enough, then you can be the person who accompanies the choir. And you know how much I worked to be able to accompany the choir and be good in this lady's eyes? Why? Because she approached me and tickled my ambition. And that was what got me back to playing the piano. And I accompanied the choir all through high school and partly through college. And it was very interesting to see that my ability to play the piano increased so much. I wasn't taking lessons, but I was practicing a lot more. And I knew what I was doing it for. And see, if we don't align people's reasons and ways of learning things, whatever they are, to make sure that it aligns with the models that we each have in our own brains, then of course life gets difficult. And that's why any model, like a school or a university where everybody has to do things, or as the marketing people all say, the cookie cutter version of something, that you just keep stamping into the dough and all the cookies look the same. Well, no two of us are the same. And one of the greatest gifts we can have in the world is sitting down with somebody like I have the opportunity with you to do today, and to look at how we develop a conversation. There will never be another conversation like this one. Why? Because you're bringing what you have that's unique. I'm bringing what I have. We are co-creating something that will never exist again because it's just for the two of us. And that is the wonderful thing about that. And that is what a lot of classic education doesn't know. But fortunately, there's a lot of AI education now going on where each child gets his own AI tutor. And that's much better because that means the child's learning in the way and the tutor is adapting all the time to make sure that the child learns all it needs to learn. And a teacher sitting with 30 kids sitting in front of them doesn't have the opportunity to do that. It's
And
just
what
the way
is
the
AI?
system is.
It's a large language model.
Exactly.
So, and that's something else that I was thinking about, is that people that learn different languages, even if they are not an expert, but are willing to learn different languages, the moment they learn something in some sentence, words, whatever, in another language, their lives are opened into another culture completely.
Exactly.
And doing that to yourself makes you realize, I guess that's the tolerant part, that the world is not according to me. Like, it doesn't spin around me.
That's right.
And not everybody thinks, even using a singular word. I say the word table, and I think of a kitchen table. Well, somebody might be thinking of a small table on the ground with no chairs, and the whole family sitting around a small table. I'm thinking of a kitchen table with coffee on, whatever. It's the same table.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being, it's a different vision. And that's part of language. And that's part of people and culture. And once you realize, and that's part of communication. Once you realize that, you become just a teeny bit more tolerant. You might also become a lot more afraid because you realize, oh my goodness, there's things going on around me that I just don't understand.
And you know what? We're not made to understand everything. We are all given the wonderful gifts, talents, call them what you like, that make us special because we can do things that other people cannot do. And many times we don't know about those things until we get the opportunity. So my music thing, that was an opportunity. The other opportunity I had where everybody here in Germany thought I was going crazy was I'd already had my business for a number of years. Everybody thought I was crazy because I said, I'm going to start my own business. They said, what? You're not married? You don't have a family? What happens if it doesn't work? I said, I don't know. I went to university for 7.5 years. I'll figure something out. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but I have to try it first. And then I'd been in my business for a while. And then somebody came to me and said, we need a new person to teach English as a language to German people on German national television. And we want you to come to the studio every 3 weeks and spend us, 15 minutes doing a special series about how to learn certain things, like doing verbs and, for example, what you were talking about in English. And I said, okay. And the studio was a 4-hour train ride away. And I told people I was going to the city, and it's a national public station like ABC or NBC or something in America. And people said, what do you know about media? What do you know about film? What do you know about television? Who are you to be going there to this studio and teaching this on television? I said, well, there is a group of people, including one gentleman I'd had a lot more contact with before, and he thinks I'm the right person to do this. And he's asked me to come and do it. And they said, but you don't have any credentials, to go back to your word. I said, no, but I do have one person who really believes in me. And if he didn't, and he didn't want to make a fool of himself, he wouldn't ask me to come. So I'm going. And I went. And the first time I stood in the studio, I stood there thinking like newscaster. I've got 15 minutes and I have to do it in that time. And they're going to show certain things. And I've written out an entire script, every single word for the 15 minutes. And I timed it and I practiced it on the train. I did all these things. And I got into the studio, was looking into that little black hole because you weren't allowed to look at any of the people. You could only look into that little black hole. And I started trying to speak and read from this script and also look into the little black hole at the same time, which just didn't work because when I was teaching or when I was doing public speaking, I never had a script. I just stood up and had a couple of notes and did what I did. And all of a sudden, the gentleman stopped the recording and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm reading my script, sir. And he said, "That's not who you are. When we met the last time in such and such, you were a totally different person. I want you to talk like that." He took the script away from me. I stood there. I talked for 15 minutes into the little black hole and everything was fine. And I did that for the next 4 years on German television. Why? Not because I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't because the script was a really stupid idea for me personally. Other people would need that. That was my downfall. But he said, take away the script and do it again, and then it was fine. And for the next 4 years, I did everything without a script, and it was perfect. But see, he believed in me, and I listened to what he was saying, and then I learned to do it in the way that was right for the medium involved. And I knew nothing about television before that, but I didn't need to. I needed someone who believed in me, and I needed to have the courage to go out and try it and learn as I go.
Mentors are pretty important.
Yeah.
And, a mentor doesn't necessarily mean that it's somebody that you've hired to teach you. Sometimes it's just somebody, as you said, who believes in you.
Because he was never in front of the camera, ever, in his whole life. He was a back office guy. But he still believed in me and went with me that first day.
Right. But he's a consumer, so he knows what it is that his vision of what he wanted his vision was of who you were, and he wanted you to be that person on camera.
Exactly.
He saw something there.
Yeah.
And, I don't, there's any number of reasons why it hasn't happened, but I haven't really had too many mentors. And it may be because of, I don't know if it's intolerance, but I tend to be a skeptic and maybe even a little cynical, which usually people will pick up on that, and it translates into, oh, she's difficult. Oh, she's annoying. So I think I've given that impression across my career. And something that occurred to me very recently was, I need to develop better composure. And I thought, gee, that would have been great had I thought of that a long time ago. But these are things, as you said, you will learn you will learn about yourself at a later stage in your life. I think I don't know for men, because I'm not a man. I know for a fact as a woman, that is when I came into my own. Possibly biological and chemical. There are no hormones invading my body, making me do things that I would never think of doing, because it's that time of the month. I'm flatlined, and I just look at the world as it is, and I take it in, and I go back to my experiences, and I say at least 15 times a day, oh, I get it. It's simple. Why? And it's not, I don't see all women like that, but I do see it as as a fixture in a woman's travels. I really do. I really do. I recognize it in my mother.
Mm-hmm.
May she rest in peace. I recognize it in my grandmother. May she rest in peace. Matter of fact, the whole family. May they all rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy that part of being a woman. I've never in my life been so comfortable in my own body.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Um, it's a grace to be a woman. I'm sorry, it is. Taken all into account, I don't think I'd want to be a man at 70. I think it's a whole different shebang.
Mm-hmm. I know when I was very young and I first moved to Germany, and I sort of got this thing about the split between, what men did or what they were allowed to do or what was considered okay for men to do and for women. And I mean, this was many, many years ago. And it wasn't only Germany, it's just where I happened to be at that time when I was young. And when I said at age 29, I'm going to set up my own company, and I was an American and I was a woman and I didn't have a husband and I didn't have a family. And everybody said, well, Rhonda, you can't do that. And I said, who says? Well, yeah, people don't do that. I said, I'm not people, I'm Rhonda. And there were times when I first set up my business, because there were a lot of people running around with that frame of the world. I wished I were a man, not because I wanted to be a man, but just because I wanted to be taken seriously. And I wasn't. And especially because I was so young and because I was American and because I was a woman, put all those three things together. That was not a good combination at the time. But I never would have gone so far as to say, oh, I do something to make me look like a man or what, I would have never, ever done that. But I was just thinking life would be so much easier at that time if I'd been a man. Now I know life is so much easier because I'm a woman. And I'm really glad that nothing happened back then to change that, that I stuck the course. But there were times when it would have been, let's say, opportune to have not had to go through what I did with having all those 3 points against me at the beginning. Having one of those be different would have been nice. But in the end, I probably wouldn't have learned the things I needed to learn. I wouldn't have gone through the things that have made me into who I am. And therefore, it was right that I was a woman. But as you said, the point is that you have to feel comfortable in your own skin. And for me, the older I get, the more comfortable I am in my own skin. I don't know how that is for you, but when I talk to the people on my team who are all half my age and live in other countries where I have never lived, and I love them to pieces, and I've met them all personally. I mean, we've gone places together, but the interesting thing is when I see what their lives are like and the way they approach things and the way that I approach things, there are just such big differences. But I love the fact that I learn so much from them and they learn so much from me. Like one day when I said to them, well, when we used to use a telex, and one of them looked at me and he said, oh, you mean a telefax? I said, no, a telex. He said, Rhonda, what's a telex? I said, it was before a telefax. There was something before a telefax, Rhonda? I said, yeah. It had that long piece of paper with those funny little holes in it. No clue whatsoever. And in my first job that was not in teaching that I got here in Europe, I was in an office and I had to use a telex machine, and in our age, we're at a wonderful stage in our lives because we have experienced a lot of those things that nobody knows about anymore. But we are still young and open and fresh enough to be picking up all the new things that are coming. And I wouldn't want to be any other age, in any other place, doing anything else in my life. I am so comfortable, not only in my own skin, but in the opportunities that I get to see to do the right things in the world. And maybe that's why my Gene Keys said I had to get older till all of this would come together. But for me, it is really coming together. And I love the fact that you and I being able to sit down as two, let's use the technical term, mature women, have the opportunity to see the world in a different place and share how we see things so that other people can see those opportunities and benefit from it. And that's why I am so appreciative of the fact and with so much gratitude that you and I are having this conversation today, because the world needs more of these kinds of conversations.
I do believe so. I do believe so. I think that that is what my legacy here is, to facilitate these types of conversations. I have lots of interests, and in those interests, I enjoy talking to people that can communicate. Finding those people who want to talk with me is a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
because behind the scenes, there's always, well, why does she want to talk to me? Or what's in it for me? Or how much money can I make? Or, and I'm thinking that the people who are guests on Email and Coffee are the um, what's the word I'm looking for? They're a specific worldview that someone else can tap into. Some people may be like, I don't know what they're talking about, or isn't that boring? And then 5 people may say, I got to hear this. And for those 5 people, it's only 5 people. I don't care if it's 1 person. I just hope that I have provided that connection to my guest, or to me, whatever, to my guest, and that 1 person that just enlightens them and helps make their life that much simpler. That's all that I'm looking for. And that doesn't make money. And I don't care. It's difficult for me to say that, because obviously I'm an nincompoop for saying that, because I should be thinking, how can I make this podcast make money? But I think to myself, that was why I went into podcasting, because everyone said, oh, you can make a lot of money podcasting. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. And as I went into podcasting, I found that you can being the word consider the definition able, potential, maybe. And I thought, I don't want to put everything into that bucket. Now, I've had, I went through the coaching thing, and I went through the networking thing, and I went through them all at the time, 5 years ago when I started the podcast. Like I was told, recommended, do this. So I went through that all. And every conversation I had left a bad taste in my mouth, and I couldn't comprehend it. And I thought, oh, you know what it is? It's that skeptic. It's that cynic in me. I am that annoying person. And I thought, well, I am that annoying person for a reason. Am I? And, I still ask myself those questions. I'm still having those odd conversations with myself. It is the conversation. Am I a skeptic, or do I just need a little bit more composure? Am I just up against the wall, motherfucker, from my generation, where I have to be the complete opposite of what you're saying? Because that's the way I am. Because I came out of that boomer generation in the 60s, where we all had to be, we had to fight the system, right? So, excuse my French before, if I shocked anyone. And that's still in me. And I'm thinking, that is not only still in me, that's who I am. It's how I see the world, how I cut through my perception while seeing, is this person really talking about what they think? Or are they just talking head? And if they're a talking head, that little flag goes up, that skeptic goes up, and it says, nah, no. And that's my problem with the concept of the podcast as a monetization tool. I'm not saying you can't do it, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be business models that make money. I'm merely saying that at the end of this 5-6 years of me being on the podcast, I've come to the conclusion that if it happens, it happens, but that's not the goal. And the strategy is to get people to talk to me. The strategy is not to make money off of that. Now, with that said, most people don't think that way.
And first of all, that's what makes you unique. Second of all, if I can reframe that for you, because that's part of my job, helping people reframe what it is they're thinking. It is not, you are not the way you are just because there's some little thing inside some DNA in your body. A lot of what we went through as boomers when we were growing up in the US and having this anti whatever thing was coming up was the way we were conditioned. And conditioning comes from society and not necessarily from who we are. And the question is, what of that have we taken on? What of that serves us? What of that doesn't serve us? And the most important thing is, how well is your conditioning aligned with who you are as a person if you had grown up in a total vacuum and didn't have any conditioning whatsoever? And looking at who you really are on the one hand, also how you communicate and how you come across to other people and all those things, and how much of that comes from your conditioning is a huge difference. And the reason when I first came to Germany, where someone said to me, well, Rhonda, people don't do that, and I said, I'm not people, I'm Rhonda, was a thing where I got away with things. And I was in my mid-20s when I came here and started to work. And as I said, I was 29 when I started my own company. And it was interesting because people would look at me and say, oh, yeah, she's American. I got out of a lot of things. And I was here when I was 24, meaning all of my adult life, basically, I have lived here. And the expectations of me were very different here because I was always the foreigner. I mean, I still am the foreigner. I still have an American passport. So the whole point of that is that, and I talk about in my work, people say, well, somebody sets an expectation and the other person has to meet the expectation. I say, if you really want this to work well, you have to match expectations. And what often happened in my life, being the young American woman when I was first here and setting up my business, was people didn't even know what to expect of me. And at the beginning, I didn't know what to expect of other people because I had never set up a business anywhere and certainly not in Germany. And I had to go through and learn all of those things. And then I had to be able to adapt the way I see things, the way I was conditioned, the way we grew up, to what was happening in my life, or even like the legal system here. Someone sued me once. And I was like, oh, okay. And when I sat down and talked to a lawyer, and I realized in Britain and in the US, we have what's called the English system of law. And here on the continent, we have the Roman system of law. They see things in a totally different way. When I talked to my lawyer, he said, you can't say that. I said, but that's what's right. He said, yeah, in your system, that's what's right. The way you grew up, that's what's right. But here we have a different kind of law. And we see the legal system differently. I still get upset when things like that happen because it drives me crazy, because although I've lived in the system and I've been sued a number of times in the system for various things, I've never understood why the Roman system even exists, because I see so many more things in the English system that I prefer. That's a preference. I can't choose. I live here now. When I get sued here now, I don't get to choose which kind of law I would like to have applied. And that's the whole point. Where are the places where we get the chance to choose and where not? And the things that society puts up for us, certain things we have to, like a legal system, we have to adhere to. But on the other hand, what can we look at and try to align ourselves and say, this is what's really deep inside me. This is what I really believe about myself. And how can I get that to align with what's going on in the world? And you're doing a wonderful job of that by saying, I'm looking to speak to people that will really bring something to the conversation that I get something out of, and hopefully people in the audience also get something from, whatever that is. And your thing in life is not to make $1 million doing a podcast, that you're not aligned with that, and that's not the way it works for you, and that's fine. And you are being true to yourself, which is the thing that many, many people are not. Because if you hire somebody and they say, go do this and this and this, and you're a part of the cookie cutter generation, then you're not getting what you want out of it. We've all gone through that. I've gone through that as well with business coaches and programs in the past. And the other thing is, mentors don't always have to be the physical person next to you. I have many people I consider mentors that I've never spoken to in my life, but I've read everything they've written.
Mhm.
And I get so much from it just by reading the way they think and the way they process the world. I consider them my mentors, although I've never met them and we've never spoken. And we can draw a lot in this world today with all of the access we have to things. We can get a lot of really good mentors without ever having to go one step out of where we are and do anything.
Oh, I was thinking about something like that this morning. I was thinking that I read a lot and that oftentimes I'll find an author that I enjoy and I read all of their books.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in the book, I think to myself, oh, they don't think like I think.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, they're diametrically opposed to the way I think. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, or maybe it's just the timing now, there may have been a point in my life where I would have put the book down and said, I don't agree with them. I'm not finishing this book. But now I finish the book and I think, how, first of all, have they been able to create a world where I can think like them for the moment? Have they opened up that panorama where I'm looking through their eyes and I'm seeing 360 through their eyes? Have they done that? Yes. Okay, that's a talent. Do I agree with them? No. Okay, that's fine. Or did you learn something from that, but you still don't necessarily totally agree with them, but you've learned something. It's not black and white now, it's gray. Yes. So I think what people need to do, and I was thinking about this morning, and I don't know how to tell people to do this, is that read and get suggestions about what books to read, and don't necessarily do that from your friends who think like you. Who will say, oh, read this book about this. It's great. And you read it and it's everything that you agree with. Sometimes read a book where you don't know what the expectation is. And you're immediately put into their world where you're thinking their way and everything changes. Everything shifts just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Again, you don't need to go away from it thinking, oh, I read Marx's book and now I'm a Marxist. You don't need that. But if you read Mein Kampf, let's say, a book by Hitler, yeah. And you're like, you know what, I just got this whole different view of what's going on. Yeah. I don't agree with any of it. Yeah. But now I understand a little bit. I belong to a book club, and I read a lot of fantasy, and AI is going to come up again. I have conversations with AI where I say, I want to read a book. This is my preferred genre. Mm-hmm. Give me some authors and tell me a little bit about the book. And so I found AI to be amazing. It's like I'm walking into the library and the librarian is telling me, oh, try this. You'll love this. Yeah. If you like that, you'll love this. So reading is very important. I don't think people understand that. And also, it's an eclectic skill. Yes, it makes you a lead. If you read, it makes you a lead. Why? Because it allows you to learn language. It gives you words. It gives you the ability to envision words. I mean, it's an incredible thing to do for any human being, is to be able to silently read a book and enter that world. People should do more of that. Very similar to learning a different language, except you're learning your language, but you're learning all about your language in the eyes of someone else. Yes, the author. I have never read a book and never finished it. Never. I might not read any more books by that author. Yeah. But I finished the book. Yeah. And I'm also not that critical reader where I will finish a chapter and I need to write an essay on what I just read. I don't do that, and a lot of people do. And they can pick up. They have memories. They can pick up everything. That remember this when they said this or this quotes from this author. I'm like, I don't. I'm amazed at you. I read the book. I can tell you that I got so much out of reading Dostoevsky, but I can't quote a darn thing.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
quotation has a lot to do with memorization. So we're back to what we had before. I don't have a lot of quotes from things either. And I always say it said something like this in my words, because I know I never get it 100% right. And I don't quote unless I actually pull something off a page and write it on there. But at the moment, I'm reading a book that's called You Are the Universe. And it's, among other things, all about quantum physics. I didn't even have physics in high school, let alone quantum physics now. I love Einstein, not because I understand the theory of relativity, but I like the way he thinks. And he's in there, and lots of other people that I've heard of and know about. But I don't understand anything about physics, but I'm finding it fascinating to see how I'm seeing this as a challenge for myself. Because I said, you didn't even learn about this at the classic time, in high school or whatever. But now you hear so much about quantum physics. Now you're actually sitting down and reading somebody who's explaining it all and where it comes from and all the different theories. I will never be a physics expert by any matter of means, on the one hand. But on the other hand, what I do know is it's expanding my horizons in a way that I wouldn't have normally thought. And as you see, you can see about 25% of the books that I own. I mean, the ones over here are encyclopedias and things. Haven't read them, but every other book on the shelf I've read all the way through. And when people say, I don't even know where this book came from. It was on my shelf the other day and I pulled it off and I said, I don't even know if I've read this. Maybe somebody gave it to me as a present. I don't know. There's nothing written in it, so I'm reading it now. And the interesting thing is watching yourself and seeing how you process what's in the book. So people who can quote everything afterwards, that's one way of processing it. People who write a critical essay is another way to process it. I'm the person who's just the very practical part, and I say, I take this and I say, I read or I heard on a podcast or whatever, and I tell people about things and I tell them the way it fits into and we'll do a German word because I love it so much. The worldview word in German is called Weltanschauung. Welt is world, and anschauen. Schauen is the word to look, so it's to look at. So it's the way to look at the world, is the German word for worldview. And I always say, every time you open a book about something you know nothing about, you're learning a new way to look at the world. And I don't know very much about physics, but I'm picking up an awful lot of things where I sit there and think, oh, all those wonderful scientific people I've worked with, I understand them better now. Because I'm reading something in the way that they process, which I would never normally do. So it's helping me. And reading gives us the opportunity, as you said, not only to read the things you love, but to try different things. Gives us the chance to look at the world in a different way, because we're looking at it, if you will, alongside through the eyes of, in this case, two authors who have put this book together and done this wonderfully. And what people will get from us today, which is just as important, is getting to know the world through our eyes and voices and their ears. Yeah, that they will get to see the way we process things and the way you and I co-create this conversation to see what we're bringing into the world. And that's totally different from somebody who sits down and writes a book, because it's a different medium, because the interaction is different, because there's a dialogue, because we're co-creating the meaning as we go along.
And these are all very exciting things to look forward to every single day. When you wake up and you think to yourself, I've got so many things to do. If you break everything down to, I'm going to have a conversation with someone today, and I don't know what's going to come out of it. I sort of have lots of anxiety about things, but I also try to be a child every time I have a conversation. And in doing that, I make the same childish mistakes over and over again, recognize them, attempt to do better the next time, but also at a certain amount of wonder out of the conversation. Like, oh, I would have never thought of saying that. I don't think that way. I've often said that every single podcast I've ever had, every single one, without intention, there's something in it that I don't necessarily hear while I'm recording, and I play it back, and I'm like, when did they say that?
Yes.
And that's what is in it for me. And I'm hoping that as I said, there's one person that's going to get that moment. Not the same moment, any moment. There are many moments. Take a moment. And they're going to get the same thing. And that's the beauty of long form as opposed to the short.
Mm-hmm.
Because the short is my intention of this is the point type of a thing. Or this is the point that I want you to get across. That's the short. But the long is, and I don't like the word, but we'll use it. No, we're not going to use it because I'm going to call it an adventure. I hate the word journey. It's overused. Mm-hmm. So it's an adventure. So if somebody thinks I can put up with Joy, she's okay, then I invite them to listen to all of my podcasts and get a moment, an adventure through the eyes of my guest. And that adventure is what I'm sharing myself with the guest, and then I'm sharing it with the viewer as a guest. So it's exponential in a way. And it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be, I'm interpreting it this way and I get this out of it. You're interpreting it that way, getting that out of it. And other people are interpreting it all their ways. And that's what books do. When somebody reads a book and they write a critical essay and they're saying, for example, I remember reading Tolkien when I had to read Tolkien in high school. And I liked my English teacher at the time because it wasn't, we weren't just reading Last of the Mohicans and, the Count of Monte Cristo. He was giving us lots of different books that we could read that were popular at the time. So I read Tolkien and they were talking about it and I was on the adventure. They were talking about, well, the English government. I'm like, English government? We're in this fantasy land. What do you, I wasn't getting that at all. Totally. And I appreciate authors that are able to do that. Because now when I think to myself, oh, if I went back and I read Tolkien, I can guarantee you that I'm going to see all those comparative social and, economic statements that he was making, that I was just in this fantasy land. To this day, that's the first impression I get when I read fantasy. And that's my genre. I love fantasy. My first impression with fantasy is I'm in their world. They've world built. I'm in their world. I don't know what to expect because it's their world and they're going to show me what to expect. And then after I'm done, then I'm going to say, well, what was he talking about? For example, somebody like Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is a sci-fi fantasy writer. He's highly political. And he's one of the authors that I don't agree with. I love his books because he takes me to a world where I don't know what's going on. It's totally his worldview. He has a point of what at the end of the book, he's making a point at the end of the book. I don't necessarily agree with him, but he's taken me there. And that's a talent.
Well, you said something before that I'd love to reframe. You said you come into a conversation and you see that somehow as being childish. I wouldn't say childish. I'd be saying childlike.
Right. Yes.
The childlike is what is taking you on this adventure. The
right.
Childlike is what is giving you the fascination. with whatever it is, be it a conversation like ours, be it a fantasy book, be it whatever, because you are still in that wonderful mindset of being childlike, which means you're allowing things to come and have an impact on you in a way without all of the putting on the lenses ahead of time and the filters and, the blinders and whatever. You're just being very open and you're taking everything in as it comes, as a child does. And that's why childlike. And you're then taking out of it what's important for you and hoping that when you have conversations in your podcast, you're able to provide something together with your guest to make sure that other people are having that opportunity as well. And that's what's so terribly important about what we're doing in the world, because we are not here just to be doing what is good for us. We are here to be doing things for the rest of the world. And what I'm doing for the third time this summer, to go back to AI, the United Nations for I think 11 years now has put on a conference called AI for Good. And I'll be attending for the third time in person this summer. And the whole point is we are not doing things, whether it's recording podcasts or reading or writing books or doing AI or whatever we're doing. We're not just doing it for us to put a check mark on the list or to say, oh yeah, I've read that many books. People look at me and say, oh, all those books. I say, yeah, I just love books and I just read a lot, but I don't read for the sake of reading. I read for the sake of taking something in that I hopefully can bring to somebody else later that will help them as well. That's the whole point of the exercise. And therefore, when people say, do you know everything in those books? I say, no, but if I sat down and talked to somebody and I said, the next time I talk to you, I would go to the bookshelf and find the right book, and I'd be able to give them something that I hope is of benefit to them, is of service to them. And that's exactly what you're doing here with the podcast. And that's what the wonderful thing is. You are providing this area of fascination for people to come in and pick out the parts that are the moments. I talk about co-created moments. We're creating something together that then they can come in and pick out the moments that are good for them.
It's I think about when the difference between childlike and childish.
Mhm.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, when I have conversations with some of my friends who know things, suddenly they'll bring something up and I'll think, I didn't know that. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't think like that. How do they know that? And why? Well, what do you mean? No, and then sometimes, and this is me, I get the skeptic stands up and says, no. And my closest friends know, oh, okay. So I just hit a nerve with Joy. She's going to go away from here and she's going to think about it because she just said no 3 times, which is that annoying skeptic that people, as I said, if they don't know me, they don't know. That's how I process. I find the boundary. I say no to the boundary and I go back and I think about it. And sometimes I cross the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I acknowledge the boundary. And sometimes I say no. But it's a process for me. Something my mother recognized in me, and as a child can be considered to be negative. Oh, she's just, she's just negative. She doesn't want to do things. It's not that. It's the way I process the unknown.
And it's keeping you in alignment with who you are, which is the really important part of it for me.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, when we're children, we tend to have no idea of stuff. So, as children, somebody can make you do something just by saying, I dare you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you do. Because you're like, I don't know. All right, I'll do that. And as you get older, either you become, and there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes people are driven to do stuff like that. They're excited to do things like that.
Mhm.
They're challenged to do things like that. They take risks, all of those things. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as they realize there's a responsibility in those actions, right? Okay. So I realized early on, oh, I'm not that person. Early on, I do not like to take risks.
Mhm.
I am risk adverse. I weigh risks all the way down the line. And
Mhm.
that happened in high school when I was experimenting with a lot of different things. I realized I'm not who I think I was. I thought, oh, I'm this free spirit, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm not.
Well, we can choose what to be free spirited about. And going back to what we said about what we experienced when we were younger, my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, died when I was 11 years old. And when they did the autopsy, his liver didn't function to 90%. His heart was double the size that it should have been, and his lungs were completely black, which meant I understood at age 11, while my grandfather was in the funeral home and we had the time for people to come and look and talk and whatever, and my grandfather was fairly young, and everybody was coming and, oh, isn't it terrible for the girls, my sister and me, and I was the oldest, and and grandpa has died now and all those things. But grandpa dying at that age with all those terrible things that he had done in his life gave me the biggest gift he could have ever given me. I have never touched a cigarette in my life. Not only not smoked one, never even had one between my lips, nothing. And people say, "What? You've never ever even tried to smoke?" I said, "No, because I watched my grandfather in the coffin at age 11, my age, knowing that one of the reasons he died so young was that he smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day and that his lungs didn't work anymore." And having that timing exactly at age 11, my sister was younger. She didn't smoke. I mean, she doesn't smoke now, but she tried smoking. I never ever did. It hit me at exactly the right moment. So when we were talking about socialization and conditioning and all those things, and when things happen to us, it could be one very specific thing. And as I said, my grandfather was my grandfather and my sister's grandfather, but it touched each of us differently. And that's why, going back to what you were saying about what we're doing here with the podcast and how you're trying to make sure that people find these moments that are good for them. The wonderful thing about having such an open and honest conversation as we're having is that people can listen to this and decide they pick up their moments, whatever those are. Or, as you said about books, no, they're not my people. And thank you, I've had it. And that's the end of it. And I'll never look at it again. And that's also fine. But see,
That's
that's the point of being flexible, insightful, and tolerant. To be able to put things out into the world and say the right people will pick it up and get something out of it. And the other people will say, thank you very much, but no thank you, and just go on and do whatever is the best thing for them. We have to be aligned between the two of us. Each of us has to be aligned for ourselves. And the right people who are aligned with us will come in and get the moments from this conversation that are important for them.
right, right. And choosing that as a business model, considering all that you've just said, because I did consider, not only just now, but in the past, considered everything that you said. And I chose it, and I'm choosing it as a business model for now. For now. Somebody might come along, a partner might come along out of the blue and say, I love what you're doing. I want to infuse money into it. I want to be a silent partner. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the miracle. That's my business model. I'm framing my business model on a patron saint. You're the patrona, a
Mm-hmm.
patron saint, right? And it sounds absolutely bizarre, but I am. That's what I'm thinking to myself. Somebody's going to get what I'm doing, and it's going to be a silent partner. And if they don't come along, okay, all right. But I will not be sponsored and hawk a product simply to make money.
Well,
And my subscribership and my engagement doesn't necessarily provide that as a reason for a silent partner to say, oh, I'd love to give you money. Look what you're doing. You got all these people watching. I'm very humble. This is a humble project. And some people might say, oh, don't use that word humble. It's not a good word. Humble pie. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm humble.
Mm-hmm.
I'm humble. I realize this could all be gone in a second.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for whatever it is. And it could be gone tomorrow. And then the next day I'll be grateful for what I had. It's okay. Very humble. Am I the greatest speaker in the world? No. Am I, I use the word childish instead of childlike. That's how I think of myself. I'm humble. I'm a silly little girl in a wonderful world, learning stuff. That's who I am, and that's how I would like people to see me. So they see me as annoying instead. Okay, but I like to. I'm a kid out there playing with mud pies. That's what I'm doing. Who's gonna pay for? Who's gonna give money for that? Oh, give this kid. The kids playing with mud pies.
You never know. And I mean, think of the song that we had growing up when we were young, Que sera, sera.
Whatever will be, will be.
If you and I both know that song, some people maybe don't. If you don't, go look it up. You can find it online.
But see, Doris Day.
Yeah. No, but I mean, the whole point about that is that things that are meant to be in my world, they happen in the way they're meant to happen. And it's not me sitting there and pounding on the table and saying it must be like this, or me running around and selling my soul to get something. I'm not into that either. Humility for me is also a very important word. And the other important word for me is being able to receive what comes to me and not running around and pushing people all the time. And my receptivity is something I've been working on a lot recently, because I always say the right things are coming to me and they will come when they come. And I can't just sit there, and it's not like walking into a restaurant and pointing to something at the menu and saying, I want to eat this now. That's not the way life works.
Yeah. You can't snap your
Children
fingers.
understand that. Children demand all kinds of things, but when they don't get them, they just keep going and going, and someday they finally get them because they ask often enough, or they do the right things, or they do their chores to get their pocket money, or whatever it is, that they're coming up against. But they do that, and they have the stamina and the determination to keep going.
Yeah. It is something that children are experimenting. They're testing every single boundary, and a lot of people sometimes will get annoyed, and they'll think that they have a wayward child and things of that nature. And oftentimes what they have is a little tiny genius.
Mm-hmm.
And if they break that child, it's a sad thing. Like, I understand that there are many children that are doing bad things. I'm not saying that, but I am saying, and it's very similar. I don't have children. I have dogs, and I don't mean to compare them, but I have dogs, and I have once or twice gone into behavior training with them. I don't like behavior training with dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of dogs that behave on a dime. And I respect that with the trainer and the animal. But my dogs don't always behave, but they have their own personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see them now, they're dogs. They're never going to be Einstein, but they are going to mature in their own little dog worlds to a point where they're going to be very comfortable in their own skin. They're going to know who I am and trust me. And there's going to become a point in time where suddenly they are fully themselves. And I've seen that with all of my dogs. Where, for example, I have 2 dogs. When I walk them, one pulls me and one doesn't. One is 9 years old and one is 3, right? The one that pulls me is 3. Now, I've had a lot of trainers say, oh, well, you train your dog, the dog won't do that. I'm like, oh, the dog won't do that. There's going to come a point in time where that dog's just going to, it will literally, oh, you mean I'm walking too fast? Yeah. It's taking a dog a long time to realize that. But I remember the day where my little one, the Lucy, would walk her and she'd pull me. And I remember the day, I don't remember it like it was Tuesday and it was this date, but I remember the day taking her out and saying, she's not pulling me. It dawned on her.
Mm-hmm.
It's too tight. I think if I don't walk so fast. Oh, that's much better. It dawned on her. Now they're not children, but they are children in a way. And it takes a child to realize I'm going to push every boundary. I'm going to have a temper tantrum. I'm going to see how far I can go. Some point in time, that child will realize, perhaps, if you're willing to work with a child, the child may realize, this isn't to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
This is not good. That's the interchange with a child that you have to work with, where give them enough rope, like the dog, to choke themselves. Give them enough, but also give them the space to realize what I'm doing has an effect, and that result, do I like that? Is that what I want? Do I want to have a temper tantrum every single time I don't get my way so that everybody says, yes, Junior, whatever you want, you're so smart? Is that what you want? Because, you're going to grow up in a world where people are just going to say yes to you. Is that what you want? I think everybody has the point in their life where if you've given them enough room, they will realize that. But if you've taken away that opportunity because you fed them exactly what they want, or, I don't know, I'm not a child therapist. I'm merely saying that communication is very important, and breaking someone is not, getting them to memorize is not the way. Getting them to do just what you're telling them to do is not the way. As a child, you say, sit down at the table and you eat your food, and this is what you do. Why? Because I said so. That's what our parents did, and that's what we did. Because mommy said, daddy said so. And we did that. And at some point in time, we realized, because, that's appropriate. You're at the table. Somebody worked hard to get that food. Somebody worked hard to put the food, eat the food, be respectful, blah, blah, blah. Some people never realize that.
Well, I think something that when we talked about evolution, and something I'm using now in my work, is this combination of natural intelligence, human intelligence, and artificial intelligence. And I mean, natural intelligence, like with your dogs or whatever, has been around for such a long time. And natural intelligence only goes awry when humans get involved. If you let nature, a dog, a tree, a rock, whatever it is, if you let them do their own thing, they know exactly what to do. They don't make any mistakes. They don't get it wrong. Dogs teach their puppies, how to be dogs, and whatever, that always works. It only gets screwed up when humans come in. And what we have to do is make sure that we're learning from nature, but not imposing ourselves on nature. And that we have now made the evolution into artificial intelligence, which we have made possible, but it is now making other things possible. And we're in the middle, which is a wonderful place to be, because we have millions of years of experience behind us in nature. We have what we have and this beautiful way to evolve and to move forward. And we are now pouring that into artificial intelligence, which is letting us evolve even further. And so this idea that we have to be looking at all three kinds of intelligence and making sure that we use them to benefit others. And that includes things like how you walk with dogs. That includes things about how you interact at a table with a group of people and not just you by yourself. All of those things come from an intelligence in one of those three categories. And the best thing, of course, is to put them all together and do something that is really good based on what we learn from each of those kinds of intelligence.
And to keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
Something my mother would say often.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around cigarettes. Because I would say, Mommy, don't smoke. And she would say, an old dog can't learn new tricks.
Yeah.
And my entire life is based upon the fact that she said that, and I always disagreed.
Yeah.
And my philosophy is, you can learn at any point in time.
Look at these two old dogs sitting here learning new tricks. Yeah.
You really need to keep yourself open. Again, I disagree. It's not how I think, but let me see if I can understand how the other person's thinking. Perhaps I'll get a little bit, more tolerant, or I'll understand, or, it will, perhaps maybe it will change me. Maybe I am wrong. And, the world, the wheel has already been invented. You're not going to invent another wheel. You're just going to find a different use for the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
That's the evolution part. So,
Yeah.
it's a wheel, it's a gear, it's a lot of different things. It's not just a wheel. And it's very important just to keep yourself open.
Mm-hmm.
Just to, and in that way, you will be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I consider myself to be pretty much who I am. And as I said, I say the word no a lot, which would make people think that I'm not flexible. But I also consider myself to be very flexible. Because once I realize I need to shift tracks, I just shift.
Mm-hmm.
Until I get to the new track, I may go kicking and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going.
Yeah.
And I know it. And it's very difficult to change yourself, but you're not really changing yourself. You're just like, you're just like a snake, and you're growing out of an old skin.
Yes.
Into
exactly.
a new skin.
Exactly.
You're still the snake.
Yeah. Very much so. Wonderful, wonderful natural intelligence to put into our conversation today. Great.
I'm wondering, where can people find you on the internet?
I am going to provide the link to my link tree. If you're not familiar with a link tree, it's a page on the internet which gives you the links to all the other pages where you can find me on the internet. And the nice thing about a link tree is, as I evolve, things that were in there that I'm no longer doing, I can take away, and the new things that are coming in, come in. If you have my link tree, which is linktr.ee/Rhonda L. Bowen, you can keep that forever. And no matter what I'm doing, and no matter what time you're looking at this podcast, you will have the up-to-date information if you go to my link tree.
And I
So
will put that information down below.
Yeah.
Great. And is there, at the point of this recording, we are in the month of June in 2026. Is there anything coming up? Are you working on any businesses or any seminars? Anything coming up in the year 2026 that you want to share with people?
Well, that will be in the link tree as
Link
well.
tree.
I'm setting up a new company called the Midwise Alliance. We won't go into it all here. There's too much to do, but look for the Midwise Alliance on the link tree. And the thing I'm doing in July, just to get ready for that, is, as I said, for the third time, attending this AI for Good conference to find people to support me for that. And that's in Geneva, Switzerland, the second week of July for 4 days. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what all the newest things are now in the AI world, and how this keeps developing from one year to the next. Not only who is there and what they're bringing with them, but the way the conversations evolve. Because between the first 2 years, I saw a huge difference in what people were talking about and how they were talking about it. And all of the world's elite comes to this because it's the one time a year that the United Nations has everybody coming in to talk, either in person or some people online. who is really doing extraordinary things in AI, and I get to see it all live, which is fantastic, and actually get to speak to people and see how we can be using these things to go forward. And because it's AI for good, that's exactly what you get. And I am so looking forward to that. You can find that online. Just go anywhere and look at aiforgood.itu, and you'll see everything that's going on with the summit. You can also attend online. If you can't go to Switzerland, anybody could also go and just see everything that's happening and be on the main stage and follow the conversations that way as well.
That sounds exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any last thing you want to share with the audience? Putting you on the spot.
That's fine. I was talking to my husband the other day about what we did when we were younger and sort of setting the way for what's happening in our lives. And I talked about an organization I belong to, and we were asked to give sort of like our motto when we became a part of this organization. And I said to him, that was something I said back then, but it's still so true today. The motto I gave for the initiation into this organization was live and let live. And that fits so well with my FIT, flexible, insightful, tolerant. So I would just say that if we are all living our lives to the fullest and we're letting other people live their lives in the way that's best for them, then we're really making progress to a better world.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'd say that that's a wrap. Thank you very much for being on the show. And good luck to you and all your business ventures moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've loved every moment of it, and looking forward to what other people have to say. And make sure you get in touch. In the link tree, there's also a place you can book a time on my calendar if you're interested. If you'd like to take the conversation forward and talk about what's happening in your life, I'd love to co-create a conversation with you as well.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.